what in the hell happened in Minneapolis for the Vikings to not only crumble, not only fold, but to just implode to the utmost degree of the word, and for Dallas to just mop the floor with them? Kyle, what the hell happened?
Well, the only way that I could describe what happened to the Vikings this past weekend was they suffered a massacre. You could literally call this the Minneapolis Massacre. I know that they're famous for the Minneapolis Miracle that took place when Stephon Diggs got the game-winning touchdown against the Saints in the NFC Divisional Round a couple years ago when Case Keenum was the quarterback. But in this game, it was the antithesis of a miracle. It was an absolute annihilation. And Dallas just dominated this game from beginning to end. And to be quite honest with you, Kev, a lot of people are going to look to Kirk Cousins and his inability to really do anything productive in this game. There's nothing I can really blame him for. He had no time to work with whatsoever. The Cowboys had 7 sacks against him. And there were times where Kirk Cousins was doing a play action pass, and as soon as he turns around, you had either Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, or somebody on that Cowboys defensive line literally ready to tackle him. He had no time to work with whatsoever. And I understand that the Vikings offensive line had some injury issues early on in that game, and I think that had a major factor for the Vikings to be able to move the ball up and down the field, because after that, I would say that first quarter field goal that they got, man, they couldn't get anything rolling in any way, shape, or form. And, just to kick it over to Dallas, this is how you bounce back from a really bad loss to the Packers last week when they gave up a 14-point fourth quarter lead against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. This is how you respond, simply just because I was not expecting the Cowboys to be able to go out in this manner and just literally smash one of the best teams in the NFL by 37 points. If I remember correctly, this is the biggest margin of victory for the Cowboys in a road game in their entire team history. Cowboys have been around for a long time, and you win by 37 points on the road, where you essentially wipe out who was arguably the number one team in the NFL with the Vikings, who had just came off the game of the year last year to the Bills. Just a phenomenal game from the Cowboys in every facet of the word. When I look at Dallas definitely needed this win just to kind of get back into a rhythm, just because of that letdown game that they had against Green Bay. And this is how you do it. Offensively, they were phenomenal. Dak Prescott was great. Tony Pollard is an absolute beast. I understand they have a great running back combo in Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. As far as I see it, Tony Pollard is the number one running back on that team. I know that Ezekiel Elliott has been there longer. He's getting paid more. But as far as total effectiveness goes, Tony Pollard is that dude. Both of his touchdowns were walk-in touchdowns where nobody touched him. That second one, where he runs a wheel route and just absolutely torches the linebacker that he's lined up against, it was a thing of beauty. And not only that, the pass that Dak threw to him was just on the money. And that was a 3rd and 14. That was not an easy third down to convert. And at that point, the route was already kind of on to begin with, just because the Vikings were already down 20 points going into halftime. That touchdown to Tony Pollard to start the third quarter, that game was over after that touchdown. And the Cowboys didn't let up. They ended up putting 40 points on the board and completely took any sort of excitement or energy from the Vikings fans in that stadium completely out of the stadium. The game was over after Tony Pollard got that touchdown. And man, if the Vikings had any sort of hope to get some sort of drive started, man, that Cowboys defense locked it down. To give up 3 points against one of the more prolific offenses in the Vikings, it was a thing of beauty to watch. And as far as I see it, when it comes to the Cowboys, granted, I think there are still some other teams that we have to consider as far as being the top dog in the NFC. The Eagles are probably that number one team, but you could make a very good case that the Cowboys are the second best team in the NFC. And if they play up to that standard, Philly's got to watch out, because Philly's been kind of faltering the last couple weeks. And if the Cowboys play like that against the Vikings, against the Eagles, Cowboys got a shot here. You typically have a thing of screwing things up when it comes to playoff time, and I wouldn't doubt that when we get to that part of the season. But based off of this, Kev, they made Kirk Cousins and that Vikings offense look like a high school football team. I mean, it was that wide of a margin of defeat where if you're the Vikings, man, you got to throw that entire film session in the trash as far as I'm concerned, because that's the worst game they're going to play the entire year. And I know we've given Kirk Cousins a lot of shit in the past about not being able to perform in primetime games. This wasn't a primetime game, but to me, this is one of the worst losses he's ever sustained. And to be quite honest with you, I can't really blame it on Kirk. He had no time to work with. It was just because that Cowboys defense was just phenomenal from beginning to end. So, all in all, an amazing win from Dallas. They definitely needed that bounce back win. And we'll see where it kind of goes from here. But Kev, the floor is yours on this one.
I have no rebuttal. I have no additional content to put here just because you outlined it perfectly. I will circle one number, 13. That's how many times Kirk Cousins was hit. That doesn't include hurries or rushes at all. He was sacked 7 times. We have talked about this all season long. If you have no offensive line, you have no quarterback. You have no offense. I don't care if you have Michael Vick there. I don't care if you have fucking Joe Montana back there. It makes no difference. You're not going to be able to throw the football. And that's exactly what happened with Kirk Cousins today. 12 of 23 for 105 yards and a QBR of 14.8. What would you like him to do when he's running for his life the entire game? Credit, Dallas's defense woke up. They were angry from last week. They bounced back and they did what they needed to do and then some. But when you look at it and say, oh, this is what happens when Kirk Cousins has to play a big game. This would have happened to anybody. This would have happened to Tom. This would have happened to Aaron. This is what happens when you have no protection up front. It is what it is. And Dallas scored in every single opportunity that they needed to. And the crazy part is Dallas had 40 rushing attempts today, right? They averaged less than 4 yards per carry. I know it's a measly 3.8, but when you're talking about having a dominating running attack, a dominating running performance by multiple people, you would hope that it's 4.5, 5 yards, maybe even 6 yards a carry. That's not the case. They ran it for 151 yards, but Minnesota did what they needed to do to keep them contained outside of Tony Pollard averaging 5.3 yards per carry. And to touch on the Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott thing, I don't give a shit if you pay Zeke more. I don't, because we've seen plenty of people get cut, traded with contracts as big as Ezekiel Elliott's. That's Jerry Jones holding on and being stubborn. They had equal amount of touches. One had 80 yards, one had 42. Pretty sure you can guess who had the bigger number. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. The point of the matter is, Dallas was firing on all cylinders. Minnesota was unable to get into a rhythm, nor was their defense able to stop the common cold. And at the end of the day, when you have a game like this is an immediate confidence boost for Dallas to say, you know what, we lost a close one at home against Green Bay. No, actually, that was not at home. Was it at home?
No, it was in Lambeau.
Okay. We lost a tough one last week on the road. We got to bounce back. We can't do this back-to-back weeks. We're competing with the Eagles. We're trying to keep up with the Giants. All the narratives within the NFC East, in which we'll talk about that division later. The Cowboys answered everything. They silenced all the haters. They silenced all the doubters. And Minnesota looks like a fraud. They beat, arguably at the time, what looked to be the best team in the league. I know they were squandering at the time because Buffalo had just lost to the Jets the week prior. But Minnesota does not look good. That was a horrible, horrible, horrible performance. It may be one of the worst blowouts I've seen in my lifetime. But again, shout out to Dallas. I give them credit because I gave them shit. So I will own up to what I had said. And Minnesota, they got to figure it out. This is not the kind of loss you want to have against one of the more consistent opponents in the NFC. At least you're going to need to continue to fight. Like, I know the division is out of reach for the majority of the cases in terms of the NFC North. Whether you win your division or not and you get a home playoff game, you were at home. If you play Dallas again in a wild card game, you best believe they're going to repeat the same formula. So kudos to the Cowboys, and the Vikings got some shit to work on.